Hello. In this video, we're going to be looking at Thomas Hobbes' argument for why monarchy is best. This is the third and final video for the Hobbes reading for this week. So, we'll begin by looking at the two-paragraph argument that Hobbes gives for why monarchy is the best form of government. The difference of commonwealths consists in the difference of the sovereign, or the person representative of all and every one of the multitude. And because the sovereign is either in one man or in assembly of more than one, and into that assembly either every man has right to enter, or not every one, but certain men distinguished from the rest, it is manifest there can be but three kinds of commonwealth. So what Hobbes is doing here is saying, look, commonwealths consist of either a single person, or an assembly of all people, or an assembly of particular people. So according to him, those are the only three formats of governments that we could have. Either we're ruled by one person, we're ruled by a group of people, or we're ruled by all people. Okay. 4. The representatives must needs be one man or more, and if more, then it is the assembly of all or but of a part. When the representative is one man, then is the commonwealth a monarchy. When an assembly of all that will come together, then it's a democracy, or popular commonwealth. When an assembly or part only, then it is called an aristocracy. Other kinds of commonwealths there can be none, for either one or more or all must have the sovereign power, which I have shown to be indivisible, entire. So we see that Hobbes here calls rule by a single person a monarchy. He calls rule by everyone coming together a democracy. And he calls rule by only a certain amount of people an aristocracy. All right. Moving on to the next paragraph. The difference between these three kinds of commonwealth consists not in the difference of power, but in the difference of convenience or aptitude to produce the peace and security of the people for which end they were instituted. So if we remember back to the previous video, for Hobbes, the whole point of having someone or some group of people in control is to protect the people in the commonwealth. And to compare monarchy with the two, we may observe first that whosoever bears the person of the people, or is one of that assembly that bears it, bears also his own natural person. Okay, so what Hobbes is saying here, he's effectively making a distinction between the office and the person. Okay, so the idea is, look, whoever our leader is, that leader has two different understandings of themselves. They have the understanding of themselves as a person, and they have the understanding of themselves as the person holding that office. Okay? And though he be careful in his politic person to produce or to procure the common interest, yet he is more or no less careful to procure the private good of himself, his family, kindred, and friends. So, what Hobbes is saying here is, look, in these situations where we have both the private person and the political person, in the case of the private person, that the person who holds that political office is always careful to put their common interests and the interests of their family first. And for the most part, if the public interest chance to cross the private, he prefers the private. Okay, so Hobbes here is saying, look, in a situation where someone has to choose between their own private interests and the public interests, they almost always choose their private interests. For the passions of men are commonly more potent than their reason, from whence it follows that where the public and private interest are most closely united, there is the public most advanced. All right, so we get the beginnings of Hobbes' argument here. There's a natural person with private interests and a political person with public interests. So the idea is these are the same person, right? So if I'm the mayor of a city, I have myself as a private person with my own private interests, and then I have the political person, the person that is the mayor, with public interests. However, as we just saw Hobbes claim, we generally will choose our private interests over public interests. So his solution to this problem is that the closer together our leaders' public and private interests are, the better off we are as a society. Because if our public and private interests are close together, then when we are choosing what's best for us privately, that will also be what is best for the public. Okay. Now, in monarchy, the private interest is the same with the public. The riches, power, and honor of a monarch arise only from the riches, strength, and reputation of his subjects. For no king can be rich, nor glorious, nor secure, whose subjects are either poor or contemptible, or too weak through want or dissemination to maintain a war against their enemies. Dissension there, excuse me. So what Hobbes is saying here is that in the case of a monarch, that monarch or king or queen's private interests are actually the same as their public interests. So this is because their riches, power, and strength follow from the riches and power and strength of their subject. All right. Whereas in democracy or aristocracy, the public prosperity confers not so much to the private fortune of one that is corrupt or ambitious, as does many times a perfidious advice, a treacherous action, or a civil war. So, what Hobbes is saying here in his very English style is that, look, in the case of democracy and aristocracy, the public prosperity, right, so what's good for the people, doesn't provide for a person's private fortune or private interests in the same way that being corrupt, giving corrupt advice, or being treacherous, or causing a civil war does. All right, so that is Hobbes' argument for why monarchy is best. We'll go back here. So there's a natural person with private interests and a political person with public interests. Remember, these are the same person, so anybody that is in politics has both their public person with public interests and their private person with their private interests. However, we generally will choose our private interests over public interests. So, the closer together our leaders' public and private interests are, the better off we are. And in the case of the monarchy, the king or queen's public interests and private interests are the same. So therefore, the best government is the monarchy.